Breaking news, this is your World War III update. I'll try to make this quick. At the time of making this video, something is rotten in Denmark. Apparently, the government there is considering imposing a nationwide state of emergency as a result of multiple drone sightings that have effectively brought aviational activity in that country to a standstill. 3 commercial airports, as well as a military air base, have effectively seen all flights be grounded or rerouted elsewhere as a result of these mysterious drone sightings that, of course, are very reminiscent of the New Jersey drone phenomena earlier in the year, which many experts that we had on the channel at the time chalked up to being nuclear sniffer planes. Now, it would not be surprising if that was also the case here, because, of course, not that Denmark explicitly has nuclear weapons, but they do have Greenland and Pituffik Air Force Base. And historically, Greenland has been a place where there's been a nuclear presence, either in the form of nuclear reactors. They've tried to make an underground nuclear reactor, Cold War era Armageddon base there at one point, and I believe they had nuclear weapons there as well. But just the fact that this is happening to that country when we know that Greenland is so integral to NORAD's nuclear calculus is concerning. Now, it's not only that country. This is happening in all countries across Europe. Germany, Denmark, Finland, Estonia, Norway, Poland, and all in the last couple weeks. So something really, really serious is going on here, guys. And this could just be NATO attempting to provide some ambiguous justification for entering, or at least partaking more directly in the war against Russia. Or this very well could be the Russians genuinely trying to surveil and reconnaissance these areas for anticipation of, maybe for defensive purposes or maybe even for offensive purposes. It's hard to say. I'm going to give you my 1, 2, and 3 dimensional views of what this could possibly be. Cui bono and all of that good stuff in just a moment. We'll speculate until the cows come home. But right now, I need to also address some criticisms that I got in yesterday's video, because I think that a lot of people don't understand the gravity of the situation right now. Yesterday, I made a video about the nuclear exercises, the poker exercises with France that the United States partook in. It involved a couple B-2 stealth bombers as well, and the E-3 Sentry nuclear command and control plane. That was actually part of a bigger nuclear exercise that I believe is going to be run out of Ramstein Air Base. Now, there's some people saying that this is just a run-of-the-mill exercise, nothing to be concerned with, that it's purely for defensive purposes. Those were the 2 main criticisms. And this is how you know that people have been desensitized to this stuff, because in the Cold War era, we could never envision a conventional war between a NATO proxy and Russia and it not immediately go nuclear. So the fact that there's a hot war going on is one thing. The fact that there was the Trump pivot yesterday on the Ukraine war is another. And in light of all of the other circumstances with the cross-border drone incursions and the ramping up of hostilities, you got the Moldova thing coming up the backstretch. They think that NATO is going to try to take Moldova and then Transnistria. You have all this stuff going on. So it's very imprudent of NATO to run a nuclear exercise which simulates full-blown nuclear war with the Russians at this point in time. Wouldn't you say? In light of the National Security Council meeting, the UN, which typically has historically been a smokescreen for aggression and military maneuvers. In fact, I think it wasn't the Israelis who used that as a cover against Hezbollah. Was it Hezbollah who had their guards down because they were running that? Or maybe it was Iran. I can't remember. But there was a UN meeting that surrounded the onset of one of those conflicts, or the pager thing or something like that. Anyways, the prominence of these events amidst a landscape of increased hostilities like this is extreme and very important. And it should not be underestimated. The Russians have to presume that these aren't exercises, even if they are notified well in advance, even if they're told all of the assets that are going to be deployed. And we can't forget that they were doing simulated launches of, not simulated, actual tests of ICBMs. The UK was yesterday. So the Russians have to presume this is real world. Now, you can just say it's an exercise, it's an exercise. One day it's not going to be an exercise. And that's how all wars start nowadays. That's how the war with Russia and Ukraine started. Russia said it's just an exercise. They kept saying it was an exercise. And then they said, okay, we're going home. The problem is home was that way and they went this way, which was towards Ukraine. So this is a very tumultuous state of affairs that could easily spiral out of control very quickly. So NATO would have been wise to postpone it, but instead they play with fire. And the stakes are very high. So no, there is no such thing as a nuclear drill simulating strikes involving B-2 bombers that is purely for defensive purposes. And it is certainly not a nothing burger in light of the current circumstances. In addition to that, we have an interception, I believe tonight in the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone, where the U.S. Air Force scrambled a KC-135 tanker, an E-3 AWACS plane, as well as multiple fighter jets. So just another data point worth considering. We also had ports in the Black Sea bombed today. Russia had to suspend oil shipments after that, and they got another refinery struck today as well. All of this just a day after those very provocative statements by Donald Trump, where he suggested that Ukraine can not only take back their territory, but maybe even go further into Russia as well. Now, with respect to these drones, there's a lot of things to think about. The one-dimensional view, I mean, the view that the mainstream media would love you to just assume, is that this is the Russians and they're trying to case the place for World War III. They're trying to disrupt aviational activity and, basically just cause problems, bring flights to a standstill and just be disruptive and acquire information that could be useful for going to war against NATO. And it is true that there is a comparative disadvantage when it comes to Russia's intelligence gathering. NATO, via their Ukrainian proxy, who is flying drones into Russia day after day after day, has been able to accumulate immense amounts of data on Russia's capabilities, their critical infrastructure, their military assets, and so on and so forth, whereas the Russians have not had the ability to do that, at least not so openly. Because, of course, if they do it, they're effectively declaring war on NATO, the benefactor of Ukraine. So they have to do it more covertly. Now, what we're seeing doesn't appear to be very covert. Because if you're the Russians, I don't think you're going to simultaneously have drones at multiple airports at the same time and then at an airbase as well. That really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, if you know what I mean, if you wanted to be covert about it. And if you're trying to gather intelligence in a way that's going to actually be useful militarily, you're going to want to keep it secret. That's the whole point of a 0 day, is that you keep it secret until you have to use it. If the enemy knows they're being spied on, then they're going to change their course of action, and all your efforts will be for naught. So, that is an argument against the one-dimensional view, that this is the Russians and they're making incursions into our airspace for the purpose of intelligence gathering. Maybe that's the case, and they're probably doing that. They're definitely doing that. But maybe there's something else to this. Now, the two-dimensional view, the knee-jerk reaction from the Russia bros is going to be, this is all NATO. This is a smokescreen. This is a false flag. This is for the purpose of justifying further NATO involvement in the conflict. And it very well may be. It might even be a little bit of both. There might be some legitimate, Russian espionage going on, and NATO is seizing on the opportunity to use it as justification for further involvement in the war. But I think it's probably more of a three-dimensional view, and that could be a variety of things. It could be the Russians misdirecting. It could be the Russians forcing NATO to commit its air defense systems to its own territory, as opposed to giving those systems to Ukraine. Because what they're finding, I think they had to send some helicopters, TAC helicopters in to try to take down these drones. NATO is ill-equipped to shoot these things down. They're realizing how vulnerable they are. I mean, look at the New Jersey situation. I mean, look what it took to shoot down a balloon over the United States, right? So we are exceptionally vulnerable here in the West. And unlike the Russians, who have had a lot of time and experience to know how to shoot down these drones in the midst of commercial flight activities, so you don't accidentally, shoot down a commercial flight with civilians on it. Well, it makes air defense very difficult when you have civilians in the air. So it's not like they can just start, people are like, why don't they shoot them down? Why don't they bust out the electronic warfare? Well, it's not so simple. First you have to bring all the flights to a halt. And then it's a very specific type of air defense layer that you're going to use to neutralize these types of threats. So this could just be the Russians, maybe trying to disrupt aviational activity, which of course has economic consequences. I don't think they have the resources to be playing that kind of game right now. I think this would have to be far more significant than that. Or this very well could be some kind of way to suck up NATO resources. Because again, this is not only happening in Denmark, it's happening everywhere. This could be some kind of psychological operation. The fact that there are lights on some of these drones, maybe Russia wants to be seen. Maybe this is a message. This is a message of deterrence. This is signaling to NATO that you're getting too close and that we can get close to you too. So cut it out. That could be what this is. This could be a run-of-the-mill, hybrid attempt at warfare and disruption. It could be a variety of things, but I'm leaning towards where there's smoke, there's most certainly fire. The question is this fire going to be used to craft a narrative to accelerate NATO's inevitable involvement in this conflict? It is very, very possible. Again, drones have added a whole new dimension to warfare, whether it was Operation Spiderweb, Rising Lion in Israel, the New Jersey drone stuff, this event. I mean, this could be Russia signaling that, look, you guys did that to us, but we can also do it to you. Now, it could also be some third party. It could be the Ukrainians who are doing this in order to try to encourage NATO to get more actively involved in the war and provide more funding. The problem is it's catch-22. It could potentially backfire, right? So if they do take this threat seriously, they may want to commit more of their air defenses to the home front as opposed to sending them off to Ukraine. Now, in terms of Denmark and Greenland and that whole U.S. situation, because we know that Greenland has been in the U.S. crosshairs since the opening innings of the Trump administration, and they want it for national security reasons. So the question is, would the Danes go along by amplifying such a threat if they knew that it would be used against them by the U.S.? Because now the U.S. could potentially say, hey, you can't even get control of your own airspace. This gives us even more reason why we need to commandeer Greenland and take over the island, which of course historically has been used for nuclear deterrence and offensive purposes. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can potentially look at this situation. I don't know what to make of it at this point in time. I'm sure there's kernels of truth to all of the aforementioned. It definitely seems, though, that the Russians are starting to push back. And I think we should expect that they are, with all of the licks that they're taking at their oil refineries, their gas, their economy. You would expect that at some point they're going to push back like this and test the boundaries of NATO. So I think it's only a matter of time. before we actually see some sort of kinetic engagement. And the statements by Trump yesterday were very significant. So all I would advise is just to, keep on doing what you're doing, keep on prepping. I know it gets a little tiresome at times, but what I always try to do to remind myself of the gravity of the situation is imagine in 2021, I was just apprised of the news, all the news that was going on today, what state of mind I would be in, coming from that place of, just COVID that was going on at that point in time, or even going back further to 2019. If somebody told me everything that was going on today, I think I would be quite concerned, and that would be very motivating for me. But because we've been so normalized to this, it starts to seem like it's nothing's ever going to happen, nothing significant, no black swans are ever going to arise. But of course, we're just creating a situation where so many things can and will go wrong, unfortunately, that the reasons to prepare are endless. So just keep on doing what you're doing, folks. Get some rest. Note to self. Thanks for watching, my friends. Go check out the Canadian Prepper channel. We released the part 2 of my review of the movie Threads yesterday. I think I did about a 3-hour marathon review of that movie and talking about all of the lessons that can be derived from it. It is far and away the best nuclear war depiction film, although not entirely up to date, but one of the best films for educating people about how a nuclear war would likely play out that has ever been made. So go and check that out on the Canadian Prepper YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, my friends. Take care.